Welcome to the Worldshapers, conversations with authors about their latest books. I'm your host, Edward Willett, and this episode's guest, Samantha Mills, talking about her debut novel, The Wings Upon Her Back. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Worldshapers, the podcast where I talk to other authors about their latest books. My name is Edward Willett. I am myself an author of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction for readers of all ages. My most recent novel is The Tangled Stars, which came out from DAW Books in late 2022, an ebook and audiobook. I hope you'll check it out. It's a far future outer space science fiction adventure featuring an AI-uplifted talking cat who becomes a starship captain. I had a lot of fun writing it, and I do hope to do a sequel, although if I do, it'll probably be under my own auspices. Nevertheless, you can find that now, and you can find all my other books too, of course, if you want to look. There are quite a lot of them, and as I said, although I do write science fiction and fantasy primarily on the fiction side, I've also written a lot of nonfiction for educational publishers and folks like that. So if you look me up, you will find me, Edward Willett. I'm also a publisher now. I'm not quite sure how that happened. I wanted to publish a couple of books, and somebody said, local publisher said, no, you should start a publishing company. And now here I am putting out way more books than perhaps I should be in 1 year. Nevertheless, here's what has come out so far, and this is probably the biggest one from Shadowpaw Press this year. This is The Downloaded by Robert J. Sawyer, the latest novel by the Hugo and Nebula Award-winning Canadian author. It's hard to describe, but briefly, there are two groups of people who were uploaded into a quantum computer, and now they have been downloaded. And one group was a group of prisoners, and one group was a group of explorers. But when they're downloaded, they find that they are both kind of stuck in a post-apocalyptic world and have to do what they can. So that's The Downloaded. It hardly does it justice. It is a short book, but still, there's a lot in it. Then more recently we had, that wasn't supposed to be the next one. This is supposed to be the next one because this one launched at the same time as The Downloaded. It's by another great Canadian science fiction fantasy author, Dave Duncan, who died in 2018. This is The Traitor's Son. It's set on a colony world where things are going very badly, and the only person who might be able to save things is the son of a notorious traitor, hence The Traitor's Son. Dave died in 2018, as I said, but he was awaiting final edits on this novel when he died, and the editor, Dr. Robert Runte, has finished editing it for publication. There'll be another Dave Duncan book coming out from Shadowpaw Press in August. It's called Corridor to Nightmare, and it is... It reads like fantasy, although there's actually a science fiction underpinning, but Corridor to Nightmare, look for that one soon. This one also came out back in February, I guess, early February. This is another science fiction novel by another Canadian author, Mark Morton. It's set in northern Ontario at a research facility where something went horribly wrong, and these alien parasites have come through and attached themselves to the people there. And it's about a young girl, because it is a YA novel, who discovers a way maybe to fight back against these things. Then, before that, we had a military science fiction satire called The Good Soldier by Nir Yaniv. That's this one. Think MASH meets Starship Troopers is probably as good a description as any. It's set in a world that's recognizably Heinleinian in that it's powered suits of infantry armor and things like that. But it's definitely not Heinleinian in many other aspects. And it also, of course, the name itself derives from a famous military satire of the early 20th century. So, Nir Yaniv, The Good Soldier. And then, last but certainly not least, this one came out in January. This is directly connected to the podcast, Shapers of Worlds Volume 4. I have kickstarted an anthology every year of authors who were guests on this podcast. This was the fourth one. And as you can see, if you want to read the names there's Sherilyn Kenyon and David Boop and Michael Brent Collings and Sarah A. Hoyt and me and lots of other great authors in this one. It's also illustrated. And I just finished the Kickstarter for Shapers of Worlds Volume 5 at the end of April, beginning of May, actually. And it, too, will be illustrated, and that one will be coming out because the Kickstarter succeeded. To the backers this fall, and then it will be out to the general public early next year. So watch for that. Okay, that's enough about all the stuff I want to plug. Let's get on to today's guest, Samantha Mills, and I will, as usual, put on my glasses so I can read about Samantha Mills to you. Samantha Mills is a Nebula, Locus, and Theodore Sturgeon Memorial Award-winning author living in Southern California. You can find her short fiction in Uncanny Magazine, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Strange Horizons, Escape Pod, and others, as well as the best of anthologies, The New Voices of Science Fiction, and the year's Best Science Fiction and Fantasy 2023. Her debut novel is The Wind Beneath, not beneath her wings, The Wind upon the Wings Upon Her Back. I got that Bette Midler song stuck in my head there for a minute. The Wings Upon Her Back, and we're going to talk about that right now. So let's meet Samantha Mills. So, Sam, welcome to the Worldshapers.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Usually I think, well, there must be some connection I can find. I can't actually find, other than the fact that we both write science fiction and fantasy. We've never met or anything like that, but I'm happy to have you on and talk about your new book, The Wings Upon Her Back. But let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. Do, re, mi. And where, tell me about yourself, where you were born and grew up and how you got started, as we were talking about just before, telling lies to people for fun and profit.
Yes, I'm a born and raised Southern Californian. I'm in San Diego County. And it's kind of the usual bookworm as a kid. Just really took to reading and writing. The joke answer is that at the age of 7, I had a minor head injury. My sister threw a rock at me in an altercation, and I ended up with some stitches. And then the next day, I wrote my very first short story, which was What Happened March 9th.
Probably not connected, but you never know.
You never know. But then I was so excited to actually write down a little narrative that I then spent the rest of that summer making little stories. So that's the silly answer. And then the real answer then is around 5th grade. I had a teacher tell me that this was a job, like that people did this for a living, because she knew I was always way into the creative writing assignments. And that's when it went, oh, this is a thing I could do. But I kept it to myself for a long time. It was this private hobby. I grew up in a really crowded house. There were 5 of us kids at the time, and then there was a 6th one that came later. And everybody shared rooms, and it was, you share all of your stuff. You always have someone in your space at all times. But this one little hobby could be private because it was in my head or it was on paper, and I could choose not to show people if I didn't want to show it to people. So for the next 20 years or so, that's what it was. It was my private thing. And I was secretly like researching publishing and learning how to write books. It took me a little while to like go full on into fantasy. The books that I grew up reading were all mystery, thriller, horror. It was all my mom's shelves, where at a certain age you just went, it's just go for it. You're keeping yourself busy and quiet. You can read whatever you want. And it's that generation where all the 11-year-olds got Stephen King for some reason, and their parents didn't mind. So you were going in to 5th and 6th grade with these 800-page horror novels, and nobody batted an eye. They're just like, that's so great. You're reading above your age level. That's fantastic. So that was that input that I was getting. And then later I found fantasy on my own because she didn't have much of that. And so through high school and college, I really began to branch out on my own. And that's also when it was, oh, you have some of your own money, so you can actually go pick things out yourself. And that was what I wanted for birthdays, for Christmas, for everything. In college, I made like one brief attempt at getting something. Well, I had one very, very failed attempt in high school where I was 16 and I wrote this incredibly long, because I didn't understand word count ranges, urban fantasy novel that was like a copy of every urban fantasy novel I had read. And I had it printed out at Kinko's, and I mailed it directly to a publisher. And luckily in the cover, I said I was 16, so they sent me a nice rejection instead of just either ignoring me or sending back something really rude. and I realized I have no idea what I'm doing, and I should pause here and learn a little bit more about it. And then in college, I went, oh, maybe I'll start with short stories instead of my big books. And very quickly realized I have no idea what I'm doing there either, so maybe I should pull back a little bit. And so then it was afterwards. I decided to do the practical thing and get a job.
That's related to books.
I had to pay rent if I was going to be doing this on the side. So I went back to school. I ended up doing a library science degree, which is great. And it's related in the sense that I love history. And so I'm learning stuff all of the time in these jobs that I can kind of like ruminate on. But I have like a solid paycheck there.
Because you kind of focus in archival material, don't you? And primary sources and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm an archivist specifically. That same degree, you can go into a few different areas. You can go into like record keeping at businesses. You can go into public libraries, or you can go into archives. And so I've been at little historical societies this whole time. So I'm part-time now in a little historical society. So I manage collections, process them, help researchers, that sort of stuff.
Have you ever heard of the Thomas Fisher Rare Book Collection at the University of Toronto?
No.
You should look up the pictures. It's quite an amazing place. And I thought of that because the Association of Canadian Publishers, of which my publishing company is a member, is having its annual meeting in Toronto. And one of the things, and I'm going in person, which I never have before, but one of the things they're doing is a tour of this library. But I've been in it, and it's like this silo, circular, with books going up and a little walkway across the middle, and it's, of course, it's all climate controlled and everything else.
Oh yeah.
And when I walked into it, I felt exactly like Belle in Beauty and the Beast when she sees the library in the castle. So yeah, if you haven't seen pictures of it,
boxes. One at a time. They're turning the pages for you.
Yeah, some of it is like that, I think. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought of that because of,
No, it's great. Yeah, we had one time here. The Shakespeare archivist was traveling with a folio of Shakespeare's where they were going on tour, and so they had a British professional that had to stay with it at all times. That it stopped in San Diego, and so all the local libraries got together to do like a field trip to go see it. But
that is cool.
Yeah, my stuff's can be a little more hands-on. It's still that climate controlled archivist standing over your shoulder, making sure you put it back in the right order. But people are allowed to touch my stuff.
And no coffee, I presume.
Yeah, no coffee, no drinks, no pens. It's lonely. No food.
So, other than that story that you sent to the publisher at 16, you said it was mostly something you did to yourself, but did other people read any of your stories along the way? Did you at least get some sense that people would enjoy reading what you wrote?
A little bit. I had, like, a friend had read that chonker book that didn't go anywhere. And then I had my older sister liked writing, so I showed her a couple of short things. But most of it was kept to myself. I didn't do creative writing in college because I heard about workshops and it sounded mortifying. So I didn't do those.
Well, when I have asked authors about their creative writing class experiences, more often than not, they say it probably wasn't the thing to do. So I don't think you missed anything, according to what some people say. I took one class, I think. I can't say that it had any impact whatsoever.
I've heard some good experiences, but it's that crapshoot of, are you going to get paired with the person who gets what you're doing, or are you going to come out with your self-esteem shattered? And for me, I knew that I needed to get there on my own. And I still write like that. I do a few drafts myself without letting anybody see, because if I get input too early, it gets into my head where I'm trying to serve too many masters type of thing of I'm thinking too hard about, will people like this, will people like that? And then I get kind of scattered from what I was originally trying to do. So I have to have it as polished as I can. Then I can give it to people and get some feedback.
Well, you did start with short fiction so how did you break in and actually start? Because you've been very successful with short fiction. So how did that all come about?
In the post-college, grad school, I finally felt like, okay, I have time to really devote to this now that I'm out of school and just have steady hours. And I was still writing books. They were still my first thing that I learned how to do. But I knew at this point I had educated myself about the system. So I knew, okay, I've got more steps to go. I've got to polish these up. I need to start clearing agents. I need to, and I don't know if it'll be the first or how many is it going to take to get even that step done. So I decided at the same time I would do short stories and kind of learn my way around these communities that I hadn't engaged in very much, grow a thicker skin to rejection. It was kind of a plan of I'll get rejected a bunch and I'll feel a little better. Like I'll be able to survive that on the bigger level with the books. So while I was polishing up a book to send to agents, I also started studying short fiction a lot more. I found it a harder format to learn. I had read so many books that I sort of had that structure in my head from childhood and didn't have to actively learn it in the way that I hadn't read as much short fiction. And so much of it is experiment. Like one of the draws of it is you can try out different things. And so it's not like, oh, you just learn you don't just learn how to do it once and then do that over and over. So,
I was a kid during the new wave of science fiction in the 60s. And
yeah.
That did not take with me as a young reader. It was a little too experimental. I still remember one story it was printed as a spiral that went into the center like that. I don't remember the story, but I certainly remember that image on the page. Yeah, so I did not pick up those structures, but I did read a lot of short
I
fiction.
wasn't even quite that far. But I started sending out shorts. This was around 2015, 2016. That I started getting a lot more serious about it and sending things out. And I got 2 really nice sales in a row, and that made it seem easy. And then it wasn't as easy after that. So that was in Beneath Ceaseless Skies and Strange Horizons. Mm-hmm. And those both came out 2018. And it was around that time that I was finally sending out all of my agent queries. I had this massive spreadsheet. I had scoured website after website. Sometimes I get too far into the research phase and I have to stop. It's the archivist thing where I go, I need all the information I can possibly get. And so I'll spend a month on research and then go, okay, it's time to actually do the thing and send those. And that took about a year. It took that long to get through queues. I think the agent that I signed with was in one of the first batches of queries I sent. But it was that long between steps of, I like this enough to get a partial. I like this enough to ask for the full manuscript. And then I edited it a bit and sent it back again. And then it was November of 2019 that we signed, right before everything kind of went haywire. So I slipped in before everybody closed in 2020. And we worked on editing it that year. And that book we did not sell because we sent it out in 2020 and everybody had kind of drawn back in publishing. Yeah. And I got a lot of very nice rejection saying, this was so fun. Thank you so much. I had a great time reading it. I have no idea what to do with this thing. And then I went back to the drawing board. I'd had the book that became The Wings Upon Her Back was one that I had rough drafted in 2016 and 2017 and then set aside and chose the other one to send out to agents first. So I had a draft that I could work with at that point. So I didn't have to go all the way back to square one and start a brand new book. But so then it was editing that one.
Well, let's talk about that one then. That is the new one and your first one, The Wings Upon Her Back. So I guess this is the place at which you do that thing that authors love to do, which is give a synopsis of your book.
We love it so much. I took 400 pages to write it out, and then you have to cram it down.
2 paragraphs, really good.
Yes, The Wings Upon Her Back. It's a high fantasy novel. It's a standalone. It takes place.
It's a standalone. That's it.
Yes, it's a standalone. It's done. I said what I wanted to say. It's complete. It takes place in a city called Radezhda. That is an isolated mountain nation state. It's a small city that's on its own. And there are 5 gods sleeping above the city. So they arrived within the known history of the city and bestowed technology, they're gods of like knowledge and technology, and advanced this little civilization. And then one day they went to sleep. And so the city has been, ever since then, grappling with that fact of they don't know why they turned away. They've divided themselves into 5 sects based on who follows which god more closely, and they're always fighting and blaming each other. Like, it was you who was not devout enough, or you who were breaking the rules, and that's how we ended up in this situation. And they built towers all the way up to the heavens to reach them again and try to wake them up. So in the present day, they wake up occasionally and maybe give some more schematics or answers to questions, but otherwise aren't very involved. The book itself follows a warrior. So she's somebody who follows the warrior god, Zemolai, and opens with her being booted out of her sect. She has broken the rules and she's cast out. And then the book goes back and forth to her youth when she joined the warriors and the present day when she's dealing with the fallout of things that she did in her youth. She followed a charismatic leader, very idealistic, believing in this cause, and that basically if they get everybody into line, the gods are going to bestow favor on them again. But this person turns out to be quite the fascist who is using this to take control of the entire city. And she has her own reasons that come in later, but that's essentially what's happened. And so in the present day, Zemolai is basically deprogramming herself of what she believed growing up and what she enabled in the city and trying to atone for that. And that's where we find her.
So if we go back to several years ago when you first drafted this, and
yes,
now you get the fun question, where did the idea come from? Where do you get your ideas?
Yes. In this case, it was a couple of things. I had just come off writing, so that other book that I mentioned was a lot more humorous. It was like a weird Western. I was pulling in a lot of things that I was doing at work and just having fun, and it was pretty goofball. And I wanted to change a pace. So I was like, okay, everybody doesn't know what to do with my weird, funny Western thing. I'm going to do something more serious. And so I was working out ideas for a more serious high fantasy. At the same time, American politics were kind of in an uproar. This was the election season. I was having a lot of big thoughts about supremacist movements and strongman politics, where a leader takes control through a lot of manipulative tactics and drums up fear. So fear of outside threats. We need to close our borders because of all these outside threats. And then within the city, we need to crack down harder and harder with these imagined inside threats. And I wanted to explore a character who goes so hard into that. Like, how do they come out the other side? And is it possible to undo that mental programming? So that was the kind of structural basis of it. And then as I dove into this character in particular, it seemed to me that that kind of leadership had a strong parallels to abusive dynamics, like in individual relationships, that it's that same isolating a person, making them dependent, eliminating outside perspectives to try to keep them from questioning what's going on. And so then her relationship with the antagonist developed from that. Kind of a wooey kind of idea question. I don't know how I ended up with the god specifically and the mechanical. So this is that I've forgotten at this point.
You got sleeping gods, and of course the wings upon her back. She literally can fly, right?
Yeah. It doesn't last very long at the beginning. No, in the past, so it's her journey trying to earn those wings, and then the present day is when she's lost them and she's deciding how far would she go to earn, would she be willing to do all of those horrible things again to get them back?
Very interesting. So what you talked also about, I always like to talk about the process, because as I say, the first 150 episodes of this podcast, when it was audio only, was entirely focused on the creative process. So I'm not moving away from that entirely. So what does your process, or you've worked on several books now.
Mm-hmm.
What does your process in general look like? Do you tend to do a detailed outline once you have these big woo-woo ideas all coalescing into something?
So when I'll start by taking notes on paper because I always have a lot of different ideas floating around at the same time. I just daydream as much as I can. I'm on drives or I'm just at home doing other things, and I will keep notes on paper. I have a bunch of notebooks strewn around. And that's just a nice free form period where everything doesn't have to fit together yet because I'm just brainstorming. And so things can contradict each other as I'm working my way toward what's gonna work best. I need to get a few things together before I can go to an outlining stage. I need the main characters and the main conflict, and I need something interesting in the world building that I'm going to want to write out. And I need the beginning and the end and a couple of major tentpole moments where things change so that I know it's big enough to fill a book. Otherwise, if all I have is an ending, I could probably write a short story that's just an ending with a few bits of world building thrown in for interest. But if I have those turning bits and that cast starting to come together, then I know it's big enough for a book. And when one of my ideas has enough to move forward, then I go to the computer and I start copying everything out. And at that point, I can leave behind any of the bits that don't work anymore. And I end up with a big messy document of some scenes that are very well thought out and some single sketch ideas of how they're going to get from A to B. And it's not a very nice looking outline, but I'll just sort of arrange those chronologically where I think the major events need to be, at which point I can take a step back and see what's missing. Because at that point I go, oh, I've got a whole lot on the second half, but it's kind of thin at the beginning. And I know pacing wise where I need these big moments to fall, which means I need a little more here or there. And from there, I'll work my way backwards from the end, going, what do I need to set up to make this possible? And I'll start dropping into the outline where I think setup will work the best. This plan never actually works. It gets me to a point that I'm able to start. And then in the process of writing the first draft, I come up with better ideas. Mm-hmm. I find more plot holes that I didn't realize were, missing, character bits. It's hard to keep the entire thing in my head at once. So I'll inevitably go, oh, I need a character here, or this doesn't work. Now I need to come up with things like that. I'll have some brainstorm where my first idea was too basic. So I'll go, oh, now I know how I should do it. But if I keep redoing the opening over and over, I'm never going to finish it. What I learned when I was younger is I would just get caught in a loop going, I have a better idea. So at this point, I'll rewrite the outline. I'll put a big highlighted mark in the manuscript saying from now on, this is on outline number 2. And I'll finish it as if I had written the beginning that it needs. And then in the second draft is where I go in and I fix it. And then the third. Fourth,
you have a full-time job, obviously.
It's part-time. Luckily,
part-time?
yeah, it's part-time.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a couple kids too that I'm juggling. So it ended, how the hours ended up working out.
How do you squeeze in writing time then around all that?
It's on Mondays and Fridays, I'm like doing a mix of work and babysitting, and I'll do some other work from home. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the kids are in school. So I have from 9 till about 2 that I'm free. And that'll be a mix of writing or writing admin, where there's always a lot of email. If I'm on a roll, I'll try to squeeze in a little more at night. So say if everyone's unwinding and we're watching a movie before bed, then it's like I'm out there with my laptop. So I'm hanging out and I'm also working at the same time. But sometimes weekends I can squeeze in a little bit, but I try not to be completely absent.
So as you write these drafts, how many times do you think you typically go through the manuscript before you have something that you said you don't show it to anybody to begin with, but it sounded like maybe you do have beta readers or somebody later on in the process?
After 3 or 4 or 5 drafts, I have something because also after those first 2 drafts, I know what needs to be fixed. I can see, I skipped a bit here. this character's not, and it feels like a waste of somebody's input to tell me the bits I already know. So I get it as far as I can. And then at the moment, it's pretty much just my husband, who's a big sci-fi fantasy reader. So he has good advice as a reader perspective, that he's not trying to tell me what to do as another writer or how he would do it. He can just tell me, this part I didn't understand. This part was kind of slow. This part was really great. And then that helps me. And then otherwise, it's just my agent. I send it to her. And then she has it from the perspective of sellability, what needs to be clarified or sped up. Do we need to crunch a little in the beginning to catch people's eye? So I get the reader perspective and then the person trying to sell my stuff perspective.
I always ask that because so many authors have sometimes lots of beta readers looking at things, and I simply don't. I never have. I write it and I send it out, and that's kind of been it for my whole career. So I'm always interested in how other people do it.
I tried it with this book. I had 2 writer friends, and I was like, I should try this. Everyone keeps telling me this is great. And I did appreciate the feedback they gave, but it was so similar to my agents. It was like, okay, I don't need to, I don't know, just get it from the one, or I don't want to end up with a lot of conflicting, if people are always going to like and dislike different things, then it's tricky for me to go, I can't please everybody. So I'm going to have to pick a path and stick to it. Yeah.
Yeah, you also mentioned that there was kind of, because of when this sold, and then there was kind of a delay. So you had a long editing period in there.
Yeah.
What kind of things did the editor come back to you with?
I actually did most of the editing with my agent. So 2021 was a wash for me. There was a lot going on in my family, and I basically I ended up taking that year off. I don't want to go that, but mid-pandemic and a death in the family and all this other stuff. And so that was the big delay. Was I had the book and I had the notes from my agent, and I needed some time. And then in 22, I implemented all of that, and that's when we sent it out. So the book sold at the end of 2022, and then it was just getting into the editor's queue. But her notes for me were pretty light. It was that part went easier than the rest of it.
Because you've done so much before with the
agents. I had done so much. Yeah.
So it came out in April. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but I know it was in April, because we were going to talk right about that time, and then our schedules, we had problems, and then I had workmen in the house, and it's really hard to do a podcast when there's drilling noises coming from downstairs. So you've had time now to get some response. There's some great reviews, I see. Yeah. Have you been pleased with how people reacted to it? And do you think that readers are finding in it what you want them to find in it?
I think so.
That's hard to know because you don't really know what's going on in readers' heads. But we've got some great trade reviews, so that was really exciting. And then reviews are starting to trickle in, and so far they're most positive. That's great. And I'm finding that the people that are getting it, it's resonating with. So that's fantastic. I've put my spouse in charge of the online. I don't go scrolling through my Goodreads or Amazon or anything like that. I think that's kind of an avenue to probably not feel great. So he tells me if there's anything I need to know. Yeah, you have to be. I'm fairly impervious to reviews. I do look at them sometimes, but there have been a few that are, they're clearly just a hit job of some sort, and I don't subject myself to the 1-star reviews on Goodreads.
Wrong reader. That's okay.
Unless there was one that was really short. I couldn't help it, and all it said was that they're talking about the ebook of one of them. I think said this ebook wouldn't open on my device. 1 star. And I thought, well,
okay.
Okay then.
That's the Amazon problem. Where it'll be shipping was late or what to do about that.
As a publisher, I actually know. I used to wonder why publishers took so long to do stuff, and now that I'm a publisher, I understand why publishers take so long to do stuff, especially when it's just me and the cat, because he's very little help, and he is my only staff member. So what are you working on now?
A new book. I've got a couple of short stories I'm kicking around too, which I haven't. I have trouble switching mentally back and forth between the two formats, and so I'm pretty much, if I write a few shorts. I'm not working on a book. And then when I'm working on a book, that's it for me for that year. But I'd like to get a couple shorts out because that's nice. And it's faster feedback and faster to readers. And it's really gratifying. But otherwise, yeah, I'm editing a new book. My agent hasn't seen it yet. Nobody's seen it yet.
So you're not going to say what it's about, are you?
No, I can. Let's see. I got to work on this pitch. It's another high fantasy. This one I'm hoping will be a trilogy if I can sell it. It is a prison escape novel, the first one, on an island that is surrounded by sea monsters.
That sounds cool too.
It's
I'm sold.
More, what I like to do is a mix of like an action, which is what Wings Upon Her Back is too. Like it's partly an action novel, but it's also got a lot of philosophy in it. Mm-hmm. For Wings, it was about change and cities and hero worship and the nature of those relationships where you love something deeply, but it's not loving you back in the same way. This one is more prison industrial complex and the way that we cope with emotion. I've got to work on the pitch because I'm obviously still halfway through the draft, but it's coming together. I'm in the messy stage where I'm rearranging all the bits that I wrote down in the first phase. But
I remember one of my novels, I had a plot, but I was 2/3 of the way through the book when it suddenly hit me what the theme was and what I was really writing about. So I was, the characters are going around and they were, doing what they needed to do to advance the plot. And then at some point it all hit me. Oh, I think there's something here that I hadn't even. Yeah, this is what it's about. So, yeah, I'm familiar with that.
I feel like that first draft, sometimes I call it the choreography draft, where I'm trying to move the pieces around so that things happen in the logic, happen in the order they need to happen. But it's not pretty yet. And I'm not getting deep into it yet. It's just getting all the pieces in the right place. And then at that point, if I take a step back, I'll take a break, like a month, I'll read it again. And things will stand out that I didn't realize I was putting in there. And it's that, my subconscious was doing something here. And now I'm going to figure out how to draw that out more, which is fun.
One of my favorite stories about Isaac Asimov, it was in one of his, he did Opus 100 and then he did Opus 200 and he may have gotten to Opus 300 for all I know. But he had a story about he was at a universities in New York because he didn't fly, so it must have been a New York university, and they were teaching Nightfall, his classic short story, and he was sitting in the back and he listened to the professor talk about it, and then afterwards he went up to the professor and he said, well, that was very interesting, but I'm Isaac Asimov and I wrote that story and I didn't put any of that stuff in there. And the professor said, well, I'm very pleased to meet you, but just because you wrote it, what makes you think you know what's in it? So it's sometimes even what we think we're doing, something else is going to be there.
Yeah, no, I've had that experience with this one already, that I'll have people ask me a question and I go, yeah, you're right. Oh, wow, I was doing things I didn't realize. Or just what comes out of you naturally says something about you. It can be a little bit vulnerable, too, because you go, oh, no, I'm seeing recurring themes in my work. How embarrassed. Like, you feel very on display, whether you're doing it intentionally or not.
Yeah, well, there's some of that because the only thing you can put on the page is what's in your head. And so inevitably it's going to revel something about what's in your head.
Yeah, exactly.
And where can people find you and keep up with you online?
Yes, I spend more time on Bluesky these days, a little bit on Instagram. Those are both at Samtastic Books, Sam.
Samtastic.
P-A-S, Samtastic Books. I had a Twitter. It's kind of dying. And then that's also my URL for my website, samtasticbooks.com.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for being on. I enjoyed the chat, and it sounds like a great book. I'll have to, I'll put it in my to read file. But yeah, and I hope that the next one with the sea monsters surrounding the prison is also a great success.
Thank you so much.
And thanks again to Sam for being my guest on the Worldshapers. I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you did as well. That brings us to the end of another episode of the Worldshapers, and now you get all the housekeeping stuff. First of all, you can find the Worldshapers online at theworldshapers.com. You can find it on Facebook at the Worldshapers. You can find it on X/Twitter at the Worldshapers. You can find me at, write these down, edwardwillett.com. You can find me on Twitter at ewillett. You can find me on Instagram at edwardwillettauthor. You can find me on Facebook at edward.willett. And you can find me on YouTube, which you very well may have, because that's probably where you're watching this, at Edward Willett. And if you do come to my YouTube channel, or if you are currently on my YouTube channel, one of the things you can do or find there is videos of me walking around my home city of Regina, Saskatchewan. I live stream those, so it's a kind of a vlog, I guess. And I will often talk about whatever I'm doing in the writing and publishing field, but I talk about a bunch of other stuff too, whatever catches my eye as I walk around the city. So you might want to check that out. Then my publishing company, which I also mentioned off the top, is Shadowpaw Press. You can find it at shadowpawpress.com. You can find it on Instagram at Shadowpaw Press. You can find it on Facebook at Shadowpaw Press. You can find it on Twitter at Shadowpaw Press. That one's easy. And that's it for this episode. So I hope you will come back next week as I talk to another author about their latest work. And I have lots of authors coming up, already lined up for future interviews that I think you will enjoy as well. That's it for this time. Bye for now.